At 88 years old, Jack Nicholson has lived one of the most extraordinary lives in Hollywood. For decades, he was the face people thought of when they imagined a movie star. The grin, the sunglasses, the confidence, the voice that sounded calm even when the character he played was about to explode. But behind that public image was a man whose personal life was just as famous as his acting. For years, Nicholson had a reputation that followed him everywhere. He dated beautiful women. He was seen at parties all over Los Angeles. His house in the Hollywood Hills became the center of legendary gatherings where actors, musicians, and artists stayed up late into the night. People joked that Jack Nicholson never really settled down. And in many ways, that reputation was true. Over the decades, he had relationships with some of the most famous women in Hollywood. Some lasted months. Some lasted years. Some ended quietly. Others ended in painful and public ways. Yet through all of those years, Nicholson rarely talked openly about love. He joked about it. He made clever comments in interviews. But he almost never spoke honestly about which relationship meant the most to him. Friends who knew him well said the same thing again and again. Jack Nicholson guarded his private feelings carefully. Now, at 88, the man who once dominated Hollywood has stepped away from the spotlight. He rarely appears at public events. The cameras that followed him for decades are no longer around his daily life. In these quieter years, something has changed. Now he has begun looking back at his life differently. He talks more about the past, about the choices he made, about the women who were part of his life. And in those conversations, he finally admitted something that surprised even some of the people closest to him. Out of all the relationships, all the romances, all the years of Hollywood fame, there was one woman he never truly got over. One woman he believes was the real love of his life. To understand how Nicholson arrived at that confession at 88, you have to go back much further. Long before the fame. Long before the Hollywood parties. Long before the relationships that filled gossip magazines. You have to start with a young man from New Jersey who grew up believing a story about his family that wasn't true. Because Jack Nicholson's complicated view of love began long before Hollywood ever knew his name. Jack Nicholson's childhood looked fairly ordinary from the outside. He grew up in a small-town environment where neighbors knew each other and life moved at a slower pace than it did in big cities. But inside his home, the truth about his family was far more complicated. For most of his early life, Nicholson believed that the woman raising him was his mother. Her name was Ethel Mae Nicholson. She was strict but supportive, and like many mothers, she tried to guide him in the right direction. Living in the same house was another woman named June Nicholson, who Nicholson believed was his older sister. That was the story he grew up with. Mother and sister. It seemed simple enough, but the truth was something entirely different. Years later, Nicholson would discover that June was not his sister at all. She was actually his biological mother. And the woman he believed was his mother, Ethel, was really his grandmother. The story behind that secret goes back to the 1930s. June Nicholson had become pregnant when she was very young, around 17 years old. In those days, an unmarried pregnancy could bring serious social judgment. Families often tried to hide situations like that to avoid public embarrassment. So the family created a different story. When the baby was born, they decided that Ethel would raise the child as her own. The baby would grow up believing his grandmother was his mother. That baby was Jack Nicholson. For decades, he had no idea. He grew up thinking June was simply his older sister. She came and went from his life at times, working as a dancer and performer. Their relationship felt casual, the way siblings sometimes drift in and out of each other's lives. The truth didn't come out until much later. In the 1970s, when Nicholson was already one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, reporters researching his background discovered the secret. They told him the story while preparing a magazine profile. It was a shocking moment. By that time, both June and Ethel had already passed away, which meant Nicholson never had the chance to sit down with them and ask questions. He once said that learning the truth felt strange, but he tried to accept it calmly. People who knew him said he didn't explode with anger or bitterness. Instead, he seemed to absorb it quietly. But secrets like that often leave lasting effects. Growing up without knowing the full truth about his family created a sense of distance in Nicholson's life. Even people who knew him well sometimes described him as emotionally guarded. He could be charming and friendly, but he rarely opened the deepest parts of himself. That emotional distance would later show up in his relationships. As a teenager, Nicholson was already showing signs that he didn't quite fit into the small-town life around him. He had energy, he had confidence, and he had a strong sense that his future was somewhere else. After finishing school, he made a decision that would change everything. He moved across the country to California. Hollywood was waiting. When Jack Nicholson first arrived in Los Angeles in the 1950s, he wasn't famous. Not even close. He was just another young man hoping to find work in the film industry. At the beginning, he wasn't even sure he would become an actor. One of his first jobs was working in the animation department at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. The work mostly involved office tasks, running errands, and helping with production. People at the studio quickly noticed something about Nicholson. He had a sharp mind and a natural confidence. Some supervisors even suggested he could have a future as a director or writer. But Nicholson had something else in mind. He wanted to be in front of the camera. His early acting career was not glamorous. He appeared in small roles in low-budget films, many of which were quickly forgotten. Some were westerns. Others were small independent productions. The pay wasn't great, but Nicholson kept working. He learned how movie sets operated. He watched other actors closely. He studied how directors shaped scenes. During this period, he also started writing screenplays, trying to create opportunities for himself when acting jobs were scarce. The real turning point came in 1969. That was the year Nicholson appeared in the film Easy Rider. The movie followed two bikers traveling across America. Nicholson played a supporting character named George Hansen, a lawyer who joins the riders during part of their journey. His performance was something audiences hadn't quite seen before. He was funny, sharp, and unpredictable. His character delivered lines with a mix of humor and intensity that immediately stood out. Even though it wasn't the lead role, Nicholson stole many of the scenes he appeared in. The film became a huge success and quickly turned into a cultural moment. It captured the rebellious mood of the late 1960s, and Nicholson suddenly found himself nominated for an Academy Award. Overnight, Hollywood started paying attention. The struggling actor from New Jersey was now one of the most talked-about performers in the industry. But fame also changed his personal life. As Nicholson's career began to grow, he had already entered his first serious relationship. In 1962, he married actress Sandra Knight. At the time, Nicholson was still trying to establish himself. Their relationship began before the fame, before the awards, and before the wild Hollywood reputation. They even had a daughter together. For a while, their life looked stable. Two young actors trying to build careers and raise a family. But Hollywood success can put enormous pressure on relationships. As Nicholson's career started to accelerate in the late 1960s, his lifestyle changed quickly. There were film sets, travel, parties, and new opportunities everywhere. The quiet family life he once had began to drift away. By 1968, Nicholson and Sandra Knight were divorced. It was the first major breakup in Nicholson's life. They had a daughter together, but their romantic relationship was over. The divorce was not filled with public drama. It simply marked the end of Nicholson's first attempt at a traditional family life. Looking back later in life, people close to him said Nicholson understood that his career and personality had played a big role in the breakup. But at the time, he didn't slow down. Hollywood was opening its doors wider than ever. And Nicholson was stepping right into the center of it. The 1970s turned Jack Nicholson into one of the most powerful actors in the world. His performances during that decade were unforgettable. In 1974, he starred in Chinatown, playing private detective Jake Jeet. The film became one of the most respected crime movies ever made. Then in 1975, he delivered one of the most famous performances of his career in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. His role as Randall McMurphy won him the Academy Award for Best Actor. Hollywood had a new king. Nicholson was now earning major roles, major money, and enormous attention from fans. And with that success came a lifestyle that people still talk about today. His home in the Hollywood Hills became famous for late-night gatherings. Actors, musicians, writers, and directors often showed up. Sometimes the parties lasted until morning. Nicholson moved through that world comfortably. He was funny, confident, and intelligent. People enjoyed being around him. Women were drawn to him as well. Over the years he would be linked to many famous actresses and models. Some relationships were short. Some lasted longer. But very few turned into something stable. Nicholson himself often joked about his romantic life in interviews. He once said that he loved women too much to limit himself to just one relationship. It was the kind of line that made reporters laugh, but it also revealed a deeper truth about how he lived. Nicholson valued freedom. Commitment was harder for him. Yet during this same period, one relationship entered his life that would become very different from the others. A woman who matched his personality, his intelligence, and his strong presence. Her name was Anjelica Huston. When Jack Nicholson met Anjelica Huston in the early 1970s, something clicked almost immediately. Huston was not intimidated by Nicholson's growing fame. She had grown up around the film industry herself. Her father was the legendary director John Huston. She understood Hollywood. More importantly, she understood strong personalities. Nicholson and Huston quickly became one of the most talked about couples in Los Angeles. Their relationship was intense from the start. They could be deeply affectionate with each other, laughing and enjoying quiet moments away from the spotlight. But they could also argue fiercely. Friends often described their relationship as passionate but unstable. Huston loved Nicholson, but his lifestyle created constant tension. He continued going to parties. He continued meeting other women. Rumors about his relationships often appeared in gossip columns. Huston didn't ignore those rumors. She confronted Nicholson many times about them. Sometimes they broke up. Sometimes they reunited weeks later. Despite all the conflict, they remained together for years. Their relationship lasted through much of the 1970s and into the 1980s. For nearly 17 years, Anjelica Huston remained the woman most closely connected to Jack Nicholson. People who knew them during those years often said something interesting. Even when Nicholson dated other women, it always seemed like Huston was still the center of his emotional world. She challenged him. She argued with him. She refused to simply accept the role of a quiet partner. That complicated dynamic kept them tied together much longer than many people expected. But eventually, something happened that would bring the entire relationship crashing down. By the late 1980s, the relationship between Jack Nicholson and Anjelica Huston had already survived years of arguments and breakups. Huston had spent nearly 2 decades hoping Nicholson might finally settle into a more stable life with her. But Nicholson continued living the way he always had. Then something happened that could not be ignored. Nicholson had started seeing a young model and actress named Rebecca Broussard. At first it was another quiet relationship, one that Nicholson didn't openly discuss. But the situation quickly became impossible to hide. Rebecca Broussard became pregnant. When Anjelica Huston learned the truth, it was devastating. After all the years together, the idea that Nicholson was having a child with another woman made it clear that their relationship had reached its final breaking point. Huston later described the moment she learned the news as one of the most painful experiences of her life. For Nicholson, the situation was equally complicated. He cared deeply about Huston, but he also stepped into a new chapter of life with Broussard. In 1990, Nicholson and Rebecca Broussard welcomed their first child together. The long relationship between Nicholson and Huston was finally over. After nearly 2 decades filled with love, anger, loyalty, and heartbreak, they went their separate ways. But the emotional connection between them never completely disappeared. After the breakup with Anjelica Huston, the life of Jack Nicholson moved in a different direction. The woman now at the center of his life was Rebecca Broussard. Broussard was younger and had been working as a model and actress when she met Nicholson. Their relationship had started quietly, but once the pregnancy became public, it quickly turned into one of the biggest Hollywood stories of the time. In 1990, the couple welcomed their first child, a daughter named Lorraine Nicholson. 3 years later, they had a son, Ray Nicholson. For Nicholson, fatherhood brought a new kind of responsibility. He had already been a father once before, but this time he was older, more successful, and far more established in his career. Friends noticed that he spent more time at home with his children than many people expected. He still worked constantly, appearing in major films throughout the 1990s, but family life slowly became a larger part of his routine. During this period, Nicholson delivered several memorable performances. One of the most famous came in the 1997 film As Good as It Gets, where he played a difficult and lonely writer who slowly learns how to connect with other people. The role earned Nicholson another Academy Award. Some people who watched the film later said the character felt strangely close to Nicholson himself, a man who had spent years living freely but was beginning to think more about connection and companionship. But despite the children and the time spent together, Nicholson's relationship with Rebecca Broussard did not last forever. By the mid-1990s, the couple had separated. Nicholson continued supporting his children and remained involved in their lives, but once again his romantic relationship had come to an end. By this point, the pattern in his life was clear. Relationships began with excitement. They lasted for years or sometimes months. Eventually they ended. Yet even as new chapters appeared in Nicholson's life, one person from the past never completely disappeared from his story. Long after their breakup, the connection between Jack Nicholson and Anjelica Huston continued to exist in quiet ways. They did not return to a romantic relationship, but they never truly cut each other out of their lives either. Friends occasionally saw them at the same events. Sometimes they spoke warmly to each other. Sometimes they shared long conversations that reminded people of the years they had spent together. Huston eventually built her own life and career. She won an Academy Award for her performance in Prizzi's Honor and became one of the most respected actresses in Hollywood. She also married sculptor Robert Graham in the early 1990s. Nicholson watched those changes from a distance. Despite all the women he had dated over the years, many of Nicholson's friends quietly believed that Anjelica Huston had been the one person who truly understood him. She knew his strengths and his flaws. She had lived through the wild years of his rise to fame, and she had never been afraid to challenge him. That kind of relationship is difficult to replace. Even decades after the breakup, people close to Nicholson said he sometimes spoke about Huston with a kind of respect and warmth that was different from the way he described other relationships. It was as if that chapter of his life had never completely closed. Today, Jack Nicholson lives a much quieter life than he once did. The man who spent decades at the center of Hollywood now rarely appears in public. His famous house in the Hollywood Hills remains, but the constant parties and late-night gatherings have mostly faded into memory. Nicholson stepped away from acting after his final film, How Do You Know?, which was released in 2010. Since then, he has spent much of his time surrounded by family and close friends. As people grow older, they often begin to look back at their lives with a different perspective. The same has been true for Nicholson. Friends who have visited him in recent years say that conversations sometimes drift toward the past. The early films, the long nights on movie sets, the relationships that filled his life. And during those conversations, Nicholson has reportedly spoken with unusual honesty about one particular person, Anjelica Huston. After decades of joking about romance and avoiding serious answers in interviews, Nicholson finally admitted something simple. If there was one woman who truly captured his heart, it was her. Not one of the many short relationships. Not the glamorous flings that filled gossip magazines. The woman he spent nearly 2 decades with. The woman who challenged him, argued with him, loved him, and finally walked away when she had enough. Anjelica Huston. The story of Jack Nicholson is often told through the movies he made. The unforgettable performances. The famous grin. The characters that became part of film history. But behind those roles was a personal life that was just as dramatic. Nicholson loved freedom. He loved the excitement of Hollywood. He loved the energy of meeting new people and living without strict limits. Those choices shaped his relationships. Some ended quickly. Some lasted longer. But only one stayed with him for nearly 2 decades and continued to hold meaning even after it ended. His relationship with Anjelica Huston was filled with conflict, passion, laughter, anger, loyalty, and heartbreak. It was never simple. And it never completely disappeared from his memory. Now, at 88 years old, Nicholson has had time to look back on everything. The fame, the awards, the romances. And after all those years, he finally spoke the truth that he had avoided saying for decades. Out of all the women who passed through his life, the one he loved most was Anjelica Huston.